Hello, and welcome to episode 1 of the Crime of Passion podcast. This is the first podcast I've ever done, and I'm really interested in crime and true crime, and I just wanted to make a podcast about it because there's some things that I like to talk about that I find quite interesting. Different phrases, different medical conditions that aren't really talked about in other crime podcasts, and I think it would be fun to talk about on this one. And today, on the Crime of Passion podcast, we are talking about hybristophilia. And hybristophilia is, I have a notebook here, and I didn't want to get anything wrong, so I wrote a few notes down. And the definition of this is a sexual interest and attraction to those who commit crimes. And it's derived from the Greek word hybrison, meaning the commit an outrage against someone. And it's also known as Bonnie and Clyde syndrome. So this isn't a fascination, it's not a fan, it's not somebody who just writes letters. Because there are so many people that write letters and people that are interested in true crime, but this is specifically a name that has been given to people because it's quite popular, but it's not really talked about. It's a name given to people that seek out people that commit very atrocious crimes, for people that are not bothered by that and doesn't deter them from them, and in fact sometimes sort of intrigues them more and makes them want to date this person. And it's for people that want to seek out a relationship pretty much with serial killers or people that have done horrific things, and I find that fascinating. I'm just gonna say straight off the bat, I'm not a criminologist. I'm nothing to do with like the police. Or like mental things that go along with whatever I'm talking about. This is literally just something I'm quite fascinated in, and some facts that I found out about it. So yeah, it doesn't really apply to people like Rose West and Myra Hindley and Ian Brady. It doesn't apply to them. They were together when the crimes were happening. That's a completely different thing. It's This is for people that it's after the conviction. They then seek out to find romance with them, and it's actually, this is according to Wikipedia. These are the one, two, three, four, five main reasonings for hybristophilia. So it's the things that they have sort of narrowed down that this is maybe why the person wants to date them, and it's, I mean, I'll just read them out and we will talk about them as we go. So the first one is, this is from Wikipedia, by the way. This is what they presume it is. So, low self-esteem and lack of a father figure. Number 2 is, I can change him. It literally says I can change him. So someone, like, if you watch a film and you like the villain, it's been very popular with Vecna in the new Stranger Things season, that I can change him dynamic between thinking that, yeah, he'll be alright with me and I can change him. The third one is to seek and nurture the little boy that once was. So pretty much they believe that something must have changed in their childhood, or they've gone through something and they think that they can retrieve that back and be able to fix him. It's a fixing, it's a nurturing thing. And the fourth one is to share the limelight and or a book deal. Now this one was quite interesting to me because I mean, who can I even say? If you're marrying somebody, for example, Ted Bundy, you're not gonna, it's not sharing the limelight. They've already done the terrible, horrific things. Like, you look like, I mean, I don't think it's enough for a movie or a book deal. I don't know, maybe you could write your own book about it and your own feelings and the person you have found and how he is with you, that kind of thing, maybe. To me, I don't know about that one. I think you might get an interview with Holly and Phil on This Morning, but maybe not what you think from that. And the people that I've looked at, a lot of them don't necessarily get that sort of limelight afterwards. They get ridiculed more than anything. But as I say, on this, there's no judgment. I am not judging these people because from what I've read and from what I've researched, they're not the weird ones. They're not. They haven't done anything wrong, and Yeah, it's not like that. It's not really. And the fifth and the final one is the notion of a perfect boyfriend. And this underneath it said, claiming she doesn't have to feed him, do his laundry or housework, and doesn't have to see him directly to know that he loves her. The fantasy is charged for a long time, sometimes indefinitely. So yeah, there's this whole thing about fantasy, and it's quite interesting when you watch videos of people that have dated inmates, that it is very it's fanatical and fantasizing for them. It's all in their head and it's ongoing their whole life. Throughout their whole day they always have this fantasy that they have this relationship that's not really happening. It's not a day-to-day relationship. It's not something you would see, and it's not really physical. It's not there. Um, and it's almost like dating a character, which is it's quite like one-sided is what I'm trying to say, I guess. It's written down here. It's make believe, and somewhat it's not a relationship, and more of a fantasized, romanticized internal monologue for one. It's the occasional you have occasional interactions with them, but it's only on visitation, and a lot of the visitation it's not a physical thing. You can't hug them or kiss them. There's no touching involved. It's like maybe sometimes even between a glass wall or something if it's like a dangerous criminal, it's not something they can grasp, if that's what I was trying to say. So there was another thing that said an alpha male, he won't hurt her. And I think this is kind of interesting because it's almost like having a supremacy complex. It's almost like saying he's hurt all of these other people, and sometimes these people date mass murderers, upwards of 20 people they could have killed, but they have the initial thought that, oh, he's not going to kill me though because he likes me, we're friends. Um, and yeah, I think that's a supremacy. They're putting themselves above the victims, and they think of themselves as more than your average Joe, someone he would never hurt, and it's kind of, I don't know. I find that kind of selfish. I think I don't understand that aspect of it, because when you look at somebody who is very dangerous and obviously has a lot of things going on, you can't really think, oh, but he won't hurt me, because that if he hasn't hurt you, there's a reason he hasn't hurt you, and usually that's because he doesn't want to be found out or you have a connection to somebody. It's not an emotional feeling, because people that are mass murderers don't necessarily have the emotional stability to differentiate between people meaning something to them and somebody they've just met in the street. So, and a lot of people that when looking up on this, they kind of figured that out after the fact. So when they stopped contact with them or they went away, they were like, "Oh, the only reason why he wasn't hurting me is because he was up behind a jail bar," and that was, well, more than one bar, hopefully. Um, okay, so after reading all of this, you may have picked up on the fact that it's very much female to male orientated, and historically, it is very much more popular in females. They have the motherly and maternal instincts. They have a sort of brain set that makes them want to nurture and look after, and it that kind of triggers with them. And I suppose if you think about it in a way, if you see somebody that is very helpless, very like the whole world is against them, sometimes you want to help them, and I guess that kind of triggers something which makes them fall in love or makes them want to look after them and want to be with them. And I kind of get that. It's more programmed into females to want to look after somebody, so that part kind of makes sense to me. I'm just gonna turn the page here. Um, so it is more popular in females, but it's not entirely female orientated. Um, because somebody that's going to pop up many times, I presume, because they're quite notorious, is Rose West. And Rose West had a myriad of admirers, loads of them. So many, in fact, that they, like, I read somewhere that they had to, like, they were planning on building a separate area of the prison to put her fan mail because she had so much of it. And you're not allowed, like, the police officers and the prison guards or whatever, they're not allowed to burn or destroy any mail or any gifts that are given to the inmates because it's their property. So they were just stacking up over the decades, and it's so all these people from around the world, not just men, also she had a lot of female admirers as well. They wanted to seduce her. Some men as young as 21 sent her letters, and when she was arrested, she was in her 40s, so they started quite young. I also found out that she was sent a Mother's Day card, and it was quite barbaric because it said something like "You're a fantastic mother," and we all like what happened. She wasn't a fantastic mother. Let's just put it that way. Um, so yeah, it is mainly female to male, but there has been the odd anomaly. Jeffrey Dahmer was another one. He had lots of women sending him love letters and amorous, flirtatious mail, and you know, he was a cannibalistic serial killer and quite obviously a gay man, and he still had lots of female interests, and that didn't seem to bother them in any way. I couldn't figure out if he replied to any of them though, so I would like to know what he was replying back. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting subject. I think hybristophilia isn't really talked about that much. I only really heard about it one time, mentioned on a panel at CrimeCon, which got me because I have mentioned it before in one of my TikToks because I only found out about it because of that, and coincidentally, it's a subject I'm going to be talking about today. But I pretty much just found it very interesting, and I wanted to talk about it because I think there's a lot of people out there that could have this hybristophilia thing, and maybe they don't even know about it because you see some of the things that come out. There's lots of documentaries nowadays. There's lots of things about serial killers that are put on TikTok, even like for children, and it's very romanticized about these people. And I don't think the apple falls far from the tree in that case. So, yes, the discussion and topic of today's interest on the podcast is Doreen Leoy. Um, Doreen is a successful woman. She grew up in Burbank, California. She had a really good career. She was in journalism. She was a very successful lady. And she fell deeply in love with Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. And it was a troublesome romance, shall we say? But yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. So Doreen Leoy, let's learn a bit more about her. Doreen was enjoying her life working with celebrities and stars for a pop culture magazine when Richard was convicted. Immediately, she was attracted to him and began to seduce him with handwritten letters. So Doreen actually worked with this one guy who is in Glee, and he's also in the new Her series. I don't think he's a main character, but he's in it. And he actually thanks her for making him famous. He was only found out because of her in this magazine. She used to work with loads of celebrities, and she is, by all accounts, a very lovely lady. She's a nice girl. She was really good at her job, and she pretty much made him who he is. He commented on it during this relationship, and he was very confused by it because he knows her. She's really nice. But yet she chose to be with a guy that everybody hated. And he couldn't quite wrap his head around it. And he thought that she may have been very lonely and very didn't have he said low self-esteem, which brings us back to the beginning. But yeah, from we'll see. But that's an account from somebody who actually knew her. She was actually really nice, and nothing wrong with her. So over 11 years, Doreen wrote to Richard 75 times, which to me doesn't seem like very much. 75 times over 11 years. I don't know how much he was able to write though. I'm not sure how much he was able to gather. Maybe that's just how many they found. I'm not sure. Doreen was by no means Richard's only fan letter sender. Basically, amorous ladies, very very amorous ladies, were sending him everything under the sun. They were sending him pictures of themselves naked. They were sending a lot of feet pictures. He has a thing for feet. It was in the documentary that they had on Netflix. It became out that he had a thing for feet, and he definitely did. Yeah, so they would send him like sexual fantasies, and they would really go into very graphic detail. But Doreen's letters were the most consistent. They weren't really sexual from what I could find. They were more like like a conversation, more like, but he would try and pursue a more sexual nature to any message. That was just who he was. Um, Doreen always, from the minute she met him, declined to believe any of his convictions. So she was going into this as meeting somebody who was wrongly convicted. That's how she believed it. That's how she wrapped her head around it. Maybe that's how she processed it. But she is even quoted saying, "He's kind, he's funny, he's charming. I think he's really great. He's my best friend. He's my buddy." And that's not necessarily an odd thing to say, because there are so many people, for example, Dennis Nielsen, he had loads of people that would consider him a friend. There's even I remember watching a video of this guy who was a really good friend of Dennis's, and Dennis would ring him on Sunday mornings, and he would sometimes be in the shower, so his like 9-year-old little girl would speak to Dennis Nielsen on the phone for a good like 10 minutes. Albeit she did say afterwards that she found that quite alarming and didn't understand why her dad would let that happen. But it's just a person talking to another person, and behind bars, they're helpless. They can't do anything. So why not just speak to them? So, yeah, she was pretty happy with him. She says best friend and buddy, which is quite interesting to me, because she's not calling him her boyfriend, or she's not taking that step of saying what the relationship is at this point. She's saying buddy, and quite like distancing herself maybe a little bit from it. But everyone was under the impression that they were together. A man at the jail said that Doreen would eagerly wait first in line to see Richard 4 times a week, but never spoke of why she liked him, only saying to him, this is a quote from her, she said, this is pretty iconic actually, she says, "Hometown girl gone bad," and then did like a little eye roll thing. So yeah, hometown girl gone bad. That's pretty iconic from her. So in October the 3rd, 1996, prison staff secured a room and allowed them to marry. Doreen was quoted saying she was thrilled, happy, and proud. And there's actually a little video on YouTube if you'd like to see of her coming out of the prison with her wedding dress on and sitting in the back of a taxi, I believe, being interviewed by some people, because there was a lot of press there. This was quite interesting. Like, to them it was a bit bizarre. But she was almost seen as a bit of a she was quite mocked. She was a bit of a joke, because they thought that she was insane for wanting to marry this guy. And it became quite I suppose a taboo subject, because she wasn't well liked, but they didn't say anything about her, because I mean, she didn't kill anyone. They just thought, what is she doing, Doreen purchased herself a gold wedding band and Richard a platinum, as Satanists don't wear gold. The pastor removed the official line from the... yeah, he removed "until death do us part" from their vows, which, I suppose it was... I don't really understand why. Like, does that mean even in death they're still together? Or does that mean the pastor was trying to be a bit more nicer to Richard because he was on death row? I'm not quite certain what the angle was on that one. Researching Doreen, she seems to be a middle class, sort of middle to upper, really. She was quite well off, I suppose. She was well put together, successful, and a strong-headed woman. She was fine. There was nothing like you'd say, oh, she was desperate, or she wasn't very good looking, because she looked fine. She was like, not like fine, but like she looked like your average Joe. She looked like she worked in journalism and she had a good job, She was well put together. She knew like who she was, and she still wanted to marry Richard Ramirez. I don't, there's nothing really else to say about her. She herself quoted saying, if one of her friends tried to befriend a serial killer, she would find it kind of strange. So she's very self-aware. She knows it's a bit weird. She just wanted to do it anyway. But after all this, we have to understand that during the duration of their marriage, she did think that he was innocent, and they had the relationship as like a nice normal couple that didn't talk about the crimes. It wasn't like she went in there and tried to dig of like his horrific past. She just saw him as who he was in the jail cell, and you know, we have to sort of see both sides of the story. Like I can't understand Doreen, and I would love to speak to her, and I would like to ask her, but at the end of the day, she seems to even understand both sides of the story, because she's suggesting that if her friend did the same thing, she probably would find it weird too. So during this, when it all became out in the media and everybody sort of knew what was happening between her and Richard, her family and a lot of her friends did disown her, and as well as the media that she was once a part of also turned on her, and she wasn't very well liked. Um, I'm not saying that the media should have. I'm not saying that that wasn't the right story to put in the press, because they obviously think it's a bit strange that a lady would want to do such a thing. But from being a journalist herself, it was very damaging for her. Um, so going back to the start and just circling back, she didn't have low self esteem by all accounts. I don't think. Like she was in journalism. She worked with celebrities. She was very good at a job, and she was just a lady who found Richard on the newspapers and really liked him, and she just went after him, and she got what she wanted. So she was persistent. She used her initiative to write to him, and she got what she wanted. She was sort of being her own boss kind of thing. She didn't want to change him or nurture him because she didn't believe him. So maybe she would have if, or maybe she wouldn't have even gone after him if she believed him. And I would love to know why she didn't. Well, not. I think I said the wrong thing then. I mean, like, she didn't believe that he committed the crimes, but I'd love to know what she would have done if she thought he had committed the crimes from the beginning. I would love to know if she would have still tried to speak to him or write to him, because I think it was more of a looks based relationship on her half. And she definitely shared the limelight, but it wasn't really in a book or a film. She never wrote a book afterwards. Being a journalist, you'd think she would, but she never did. She kept herself to herself. We actually don't know where Doreen is now. She's sort of gone to her own little life, and she's going on with it. And it's I'd love a book from her though. I would really, however much she didn't write one. If she wants to, Doreen, come on now. Um, and he for sure was far from perfect. It wasn't like you know, it wasn't like that. I'm not sure what to think of Doreen. In like at the end of the day, I'm really not sure what to think about her. There wasn't a lot about her. It was more about what she was doing, or isn't it strange how this lady's acting? It wasn't. It wasn't really about her herself. They didn't have a lot of news on her, which is a shame, because you'd think now, like if I suppose if it was nowadays, they would be able to do a deep dive on her, but she doesn't have a lot of information out there about her other than her job and where she grew up. But in 2022, there is reports that she is 5 foot 51 inches tall. She's 67 years of age, and she looks young and radiant. And good for her, honestly. They never did divorce. They're still married, technically, kind of. I don't know what happens when they die. I'm not really sure. And there was no mention of the divorce proceedings in Richard's will, and he did get legally married, so it was kind of weird. Maybe he didn't really believe in marriage that much. He was a Satanist, which I found also quite interesting that he decided to marry, because maybe it was something to do with I genuinely don't know, because I don't think that Satanists really get married by a pastor. Like, that's not, like, I know he was kind of about the wedding band and stuff, but I don't really know what he gained from that. They stopped corresponding in 2009 after evidence about a 9-year-old girl that was one of Richard's victims very early on. A lot of evidence came about that it was him that committed the crime, and that must have been Doreen's last straw, because it was a very horrific crime on a child. And Doreen always said that she really wanted children, but she kind of didn't would prefer to have Richard than children, so she chose Richard Ramirez over her own female instincts of having children. She just decided that it wasn't as important as Richard was to her. So when this came out about the child, maybe that was the last straw for her, and she circled round and reevaluated, and yeah, she stopped corresponding with him altogether. She never saw him again. Um, so yeah, that was that was Doreen. Just after that, there was another video I found. So it wasn't about Doreen. It was about a lady called Misty. Um, so basically, Misty had a different kind of relationship with Richard. It wasn't really about wanting to marry him. She saw him when he was a lot younger, and this was when he was the conviction was being televised. She saw him in the glasses and with his long hair, and she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna get me some of that." So she fell in love with Richards, and she says several times that she was in love with him. She loved him, um, and I'm not laughing at her. I'm just saying it was very it's quite sad because he did make women fall in love with him, and I just don't know how, but he did, and she was in love with him wholeheartedly. That was it. Same as Doreen. But yeah, she fell in love with the younger televised Richard, and she wrote to him later on in life without having seen him in several years. She was a lot younger. I would say she was about 30 when she wrote to him, and this was in the 90s. So about this time he was getting on a little bit. He had gone through he had gone through the justice system and it hadn't treated him well. Let's just put that. So his correspondence with her and hers back were entirely sexual. They were predominantly wrote about their fantasies, and she admits that his were far more extreme than hers were. He writes about tying her up and gagging her and what he would do to her and how and why. It was very graphic. Um, for a handwritten note, and also I didn't know that sort of stuff could get through the barriers of the prison. It's kind of a bit, isn't that like classed as sort of pornography? I'm not sure. So she does describe their relationship as a fantasy in the video. Like, so that's one of the things that kind of struck me, is that she's self-aware as well. She knows what's happening. But in reality, on the other side of it, she met up with him. She met up with him one time, and before she went in, she was very frightened. She didn't say she was nervous. She didn't say she was apprehensive or excited to meet him, because she was in love with him, and he was, in all accounts, her boyfriend at this point. She definitely said frightened. She was scared. So when she met him, he did his usual stint, and this is a bit graphic, sorry. But when anybody really met up with Richard in a jail, he would openly masturbate in front of them. He did it regardless of who else was in the room, if other people had come to see him, because sometimes there would be people, like a fan who was a man. I've watched a video of this guy, and he said he went to see Richard when he was in jail, and they had been corresponding, not sexually, just they had been talking about things, and he said that he had an interest in crime and that he was Richard Ramirez. Can I come and meet you? And he went with, and there was like about 5 of them who went in at the same time, and Richard was behind glass, and Richard stood up. He directly looked this one lady in the eye, got on with it, should we say, and sat back down like nothing had even happened. It was very. It's not. He has no social construct, does he? He doesn't understand that sort of thing. So yeah, he did that in front of her. He actually even. Sadly, he did this in front of his 15-year-old niece. I watched a documentary, and she used to be babysat by him when she was younger, and she was very confused as to why all of this had happened. And to her, he was Uncle Richard that came and looked after us when we were younger. It was like a family member. They were quite close, and as soon as he was put into jail, they wrote through and said, "Can the family come and see him?" They did, and that was the first thing he sort of did to her, and said, if you were younger, oh, can you lift up your skirt? And it's kind of something was just not right with the guy. Evidently. But yeah, he did that in front of her, and she wasn't happy with that. She didn't like it, and it was very off-putting for her. Anyway, she described his eyes, which was quite interesting because his eyes, I think, are very poignant. He has very descriptive eyes, and you can tell a lot by someone's eyes. But his is very readable, and it's quite interesting. But she described his eyes as shark-like or like a dog before it bites. Um, which yeah, accurate. That's very poetic, very well put, I'd say. Yeah. So she she described him beforehand though, saying she enjoyed the way he looked when he was younger. So it was a lot about his hair. She liked the way he dressed, and she liked his lips. And I hadn't thought about this before, but reading up on it, because in some of the pictures his lips are quite protruding. They're quite perky. He's got quite nice plump lips, and reading up on it, I have a feeling that it was from the anesthetic, from his dentistry, because when he went into jail, he had been beaten up quite severely before he went in. His teeth were a mess anyway. That's one of the reasons why they caught him. He used to be having dentistry quite often because of his he used to drink Coca-Cola and eat sugary cereal every morning before school. Um, and one of his classmates has actually said that he would tell Richard, go and clean your teeth or keep your mouth shut because your breath is awful, because he would never clean his teeth ever. Which is, on the documentary, somebody said he smelled like a goat because he had very bad teeth with like rotting cysts and stuff inside. So he had a lot of dentistry before he was put on the television, and on some of the pictures his mouth is very big on it, and it's some later ones not so much, and certainly when he came into the jail hardly any lips there at all. So I think the way she was describing them, it kind of looks like he has filler in his lips, but that's not really anything to do with this, but it was quite interesting to me that that's one of the things she found out. Anyway, she stopped writing to him. She didn't want to fucking see him again, and that was the end of that relationship. She was very embarrassed to be on the series. It's on YouTube. I will link it below. It's kind of weird though because the documentary predominantly is in French, and then when they're interviewing her, it's in English. So I don't know. But yes, there is no judgment here. But she was another victim of Richard's like manipulation, I guess. And hybristophilia is a very interesting subject because this isn't about fans. It's not about that. It's about more. It's about wanting a relationship with them and seeing love in the darkest and most evil sort of people, and still fancying them. But yeah, there's no judgment. I'm just telling a story that I found online, and I find it really interesting. Yes, love has its ways, I guess. But yeah, that was the first podcast. That's what I have today. I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, thanks guys. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.